Ross Dellenger joins the Big Mountain to talk about the CFP and the new governance proposal.
The CFP, House Settlement, and NCAA Governance are always in the news, so we're back on the Big Mountain with a very special guest.
Welcome back to the Big Mountain. I am JY. This is my good friend Steve, and we have invited Ross Dellenger, the Yahoo sports writer of all things college football, college athletics, college governance, and just for us, one of the premier trustworthy sources that we use and listen to and read almost every day. I know a lot of our viewers do as well. So we're very anxious and excited that he was able to join us here. We talk about the CFP, we talk about governance, and then Steve, of course, has to talk about whether or not there's going to be any congressional action coming. And Ross has pretty much answers for all of it. So without further ado, we're going to get into our conversation with Ross Dellenger. And with us here on the Big Mountain, Ross Dellenger. Welcome to the mountain.
Good to be on the mountain.
We really appreciate your time with us. We have a lot we want to cover, and I know we want to be respectful of your time. So let's get right into it here. CFP changes seem to be making the headlines these days over the past few weeks and months. You know, obviously moving potentially from where we are today in a 12-team model to a possibly 16-team model. There's talk about the 4-4-2-2-1 and then three, outsides that they can get in at larges. Then obviously the model that's the 5+11, and now we're talking about no AQ models. So I want to hear from you as we sit here today. I mean, what model do you think maybe has the best chance of being approved moving forward, or do you think maybe we're just going to sit with a 12-team for a while?
Yeah, well, it changes by the week, or if not by the day. I would have told you a different answer last week before the SEC spring meetings, but the SEC meetings kind of threw everybody, most notably the Big Ten, a curveball a little bit on the format. I think many Big Ten administrators thought the SEC administrators were kind of on board, and maybe they were with this 4-4-2-2-1 multiple AQ model, but coaches spoke out last week against it, and more data was just shown, I think, by Greg Sankey and other conference leaders. And so it kind of pushed them off of that toward a model that's has more of an at-large pool. So they're, a little bit at an impasse because the Big Ten seems to be very committed to a model with multiple automatic qualifiers. And if they were to move off that model, I think they would like everybody to play 9 conference games. And right now the SEC and the ACC play 8, and the Big 12 and Big 10 play 9. So there's a thought that everybody needs to play 9 conference games in order to do any 5+11, 5+9 model with more at larges. So they seem to be at an impasse. I would expect the conversations to continue over a variety of models over the next few weeks, if not a couple months. They don't do anything quickly. So I can't imagine this, being something that's finalized by the end of the month. And Greg Sankey said this last week, is that, his league has to make a determination on how many conference games they play next year, probably by August or so. And I doubt the CFP format will be finalized by then. So they're gonna have to make a decision on 8 versus 9 games, probably 8, given the past of that league. And that's gonna make it difficult, I think, for the Big Ten to agree on a format that allows in many more teams in an at-large pool than does now. So it's hard to say where they go. It really is. It seems like I said earlier, it seems like every week there's kind of new information that makes you think that they're going to go in this direction, and then new info comes and it kind of sounds like they're going in this direction. So it's kind of indicative of college sports in general, a fractured group of conferences that can't all agree.
Yeah, and with that, I quick follow up. I think Steve does then too. And it was almost daily last week. I mean, we went through three models, and I was following your reporting, and it was every day it was a new model that was being discussed. And just again speaks to where we're at right now in that environment. My follow up, and maybe this is Steve's as well. You talked about the nine conference games for all four, A4 entities. Does a Big Ten and SEC scheduling agreement that's been kind of floated and talked about as well? Does that really play into having somewhat of a consistent AQ so that they can also do, as I think the Big Ten really is interested in doing, some sort of a scheduling agreement? Does that factor in here as well?
Yeah, part of the idea of doing a kind of a multi AQ format was that the SEC and all these other leagues would be guaranteed certain spots and then would be able to play more difficult non-conference games and would be able to play more conference games, 9 games in the SEC's case. But now that you don't have, a multi AQ format, that it puts all of that, I think, into question. I don't know that there's an incentive there for the SEC to go to 9 games if they're not for this multiple AQ format, and I don't know that there's an incentive to play tougher non-conference games. Um, like a Big Ten SEC annual game for all their conference teams to play at least one game against one another.
Yeah.
I don't know that the incentive is there for that either. So that all kind of falls apart if you don't have kind of the multi AQ type of guaranteed spots where your league is protected. And it just seems like we're drifting more away from that type of model. And those some SEC coaches talked about it, from meetings last week. I don't think anything's finalized, and it's just been for now a discussion topic. And if it was relying on a multiple AQ format, which it seems like it was, then it kind of now seems to be very uncertain whether that is going to happen.
Okay. Good. Okay. Well, let's get to the next topic here. Want to talk about governance changes. And so the NCAA has put out some proposed changes here to the D1 governance, some dramatic increases to the seats at the table, or at least the allocation of the seats at the table, as well as the weighting of those seats. We had Big West Commissioner Butterly on just a few weeks ago. He described this as, quote, power consolidation masquerading as progress. And he spoke to us about that. Would love to hear from you here. And my question really is, how much kind of collaboration do you think is really going to happen here between all the D1 conferences in making changes to this NCAA D1 governance?
Yeah, right now it's the proposal's 65% of weighted voting for the Power Four conferences. So I think it's about like 17% each. They get 17% each. And so ideally, the power conferences want 100%, and they want to start their own kind of legislative rulemaking division within the NCAA. Greg Sankey mentioned that last week. So that's kind of on the table. That's kind of like um, the proposal from the Power Four to the NCAA's proposal. Um, it probably finishes somewhere in the middle. Um, I don't know that they're going to get much more than 65% in any kind of governance structure where they don't, where they're in with all the other leagues, all the other 32 leagues. Um, so this is like I think for a lot of people, it's kind of a boring issue, but it's really important when you look at kind of the long term. future of the NCAA in governance in the NCAA tournaments and the NCAA championships. Uh, so I don't know where this ends, but people like Dan Butterly and Tom Wistershill of the Big Sky, Michael Cross of the SoCon, they've come out publicly, a lot of them, and believe that this proposal from the NCAA grants too much power to the power conferences. And the power conferences believe they should have more power. They should have even a separate governing model. So it's, like I mentioned, they're kind of at an impasse with the CFP. It feels like there's an impasse with this as well. And there's also talk, and there was talk a few weeks ago at the Big Ten meetings that at least for just football legislation and football rulemaking, it be broken out separate from the NCAA, even not just a separate division in the NCAA, but football rulemaking be completely broken off into some other entity. So there's that going on as well. I don't know where it ends. I hate to predict it because it's again, just like CFP, it's very fluid, right? And all these type of dominoes, these big issues we're talking about, like CFP and NCAA governance, even the college football calendar, the transfer portal, and all that. All of it's contingent on the House settlement being approved, and so you're kind of waiting for that domino to drop for then the other ones to follow suit.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think for this conversation, we weren't going to go down the House settlement route, just I think there's other things that we want to focus on, but clearly hoping that gets resolved here in the next week or two. I think that's what everybody's hoping for. I have a quick question for you, kind of a follow up to that governance. I'm a G6 guy. I'm a big Mountain West guy. We follow the pack a lot. And you mentioned some of the conferences, at least the commissioners of conferences that have been speaking out, Big Sky, Big West. And then, of course, we clearly know where the A4 are headed. I have not heard much, and you please correct me if you have, from any of the G6 commissioners regarding these changes. And I want to throw something out there, and you can say, yeah, maybe there's something to it, maybe there's not. But the G6 clearly are very careful to upset the apple cart when it comes to the CFP because they want to maintain this one AQ for their G6 conferences. Do you feel like that is a bargaining chip? Are they held hostage because of that from saying too much against the A4? And I'm not trying to be too salacious here, but would love to hear any of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that you're reading that accurately.
Okay.
I think the G6 group is kind of at the behest of the power conferences in keeping right some of this A not just the AQ but obviously $120 million
Right.
every year in distribution, and there's a fear that rocking the boat too much will uh, not be good for your future access into the CFP and your distribution financially from the CFP. So I would assume those leagues have, they just, I think they probably feel like they have a little more to lose if they speak too publicly, and so they have stayed a little more quiet. But the G6 are in a tough spot because they have this access point and they have this revenue distribution, but new this new revenue sharing era, um, the gaps between them and the power conferences will grow to a point that most would say it's going to be unsustainable to continue competing with them. And I think some of them probably do understand that. I mean, there's G6 football programs that are going to have trouble getting to 1.5 million
Right.
for their roster, and you're going to have power conference football programs at 16, 18 million, potentially over 20. So you can see through using through third party NIL stuff. So you can see how the gaps are going to grow. So I don't know where the future lies with access for the group of six, but they certainly don't want any to do anything that would impact that access in that distribution um, in any way. And so I think you're reading that right, and that probably keeping quiet for now is a good idea.
So a follow up on that, the we started talking about the CFP. CFP gets they get all the headlines, it gets all the clicks. We both follow you on Twitter and we see your updates or they're coming in constantly about the CFP. And I'm sure your articles on Yahoo Sports they get the most hits when you're talking about the CFP. Do you have any indication that a lot of this, the CFP negotiations, the disagreement, is there really major disagreements between the power conference on this? Or is there any indication that it's kind of a negotiation ploy? The SEC, they're going to end up great no matter what, whether it's the 5-12 model, the 4-4 model. Do they really have real disagreements with the ACC, the Big 12, the Big 10, or are they using the negotiation of a CFP to get what they want as far as governance and other things?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything's probably a negotiation to a degree, right? I mean, public statements when you see commissioners or administrators, even coaches making um, maybe rash sort of public statements or strong, aggressive public statements. There's probably something more behind it, and we are right in the middle of a lot of negotiations. It's been interesting. The CFP, right, is one. The NCAA governance, like we talked about, is another. Where to put the transfer portal in the college football calendar is kind of another negotiation that the conferences don't seem to be on the same page on. How to handle revenue share in the clearinghouse and all this stuff with House. There's disagreements to that as well. It's really all indicative to college sports being set up like it is, where it is fractured, it's regional, and everybody's out for their own conference and their own school, and you can imagine why it makes sense. But it also creates a lot of these, like what you're talking about, a lot of these sort of negotiating tactics um, out in public. And I think you'll probably only see more of that as we go here. There's a lot of meetings coming up this month. There's been a lot of meetings and conferences and stuff in May, and then June brings a few more national meetings in a couple of weeks. There's a commissioner conference in Asheville where all the commissioners will meet, all the D1 commissioners will meet, and CFP will meet there. So there's all this stuff going on, all these meetings kind of going on. Um, and I think it's fair to say that that many are using, you know, public statements and actions as negotiating to get what they want in the room, on all these issues.
We have one last topic we want to get you with, and then we're going to let you go here, but it has to do with Congress and possible congressional action, Steve. And I know this is one that you're really interested in, so I'll let you have it.
Ross, I've been a pessimist over the last year about Washington coming in and fixing college football's problems. But I've read your work, and I've listened to you on your podcast. You've sounded more optimistic when you've talked about Senator Ted Cruz and his committee. You've talked about the President Trump calling for a commission. You've sounded more optimistic than me when I've heard you. So I want to ask you, what do you think the likelihood within, let's say, the next year of some kind of congressional action, whether it could be an antitrust waiver or some kind of assistance, official assistance from Washington actually happening?
Yeah, I mean, every time somebody mentioned to me recently that they're closer than they've ever been on a bill, but that doesn't mean they're very close. And I think that's pretty accurate. I think that they are closer. I think there's two main issues right now that seems to be holding things up. But when you look at the big picture, it is hard given all the issues going on in the world, the serious issues, war and tariffs and tax bills and all this stuff, that they would really be able to get something done here. It is hard to get over that, but the five senators, three Democrats and two Republican senators, have been meeting. I think they've met in person, the actual senators, not just their staffs, at least four times over the last like 4 months or so, which is a pretty like a big deal. Like that's apparently pretty unusual. And so they've done a lot of work, and their staffs have done a lot of work. Their staffs have met probably way more than that, maybe more like weekly since probably February or March. But again, they get to a point where they're just hurdles that they're having trouble getting over, whether that's the anti-employment clause that's in a bill or some medical trust fund that's been an issue in the past, or the antitrust provision and who to give the antitrust protection to, what entity, the NCAA, some government entity, the new enforcement entity that the power conferences are controlling. Like those are all the issues I think that create disagreements. And then, on top of that, I think you have just the politics of it. My wife is a political reporter, and you know, uh, D Congress has never been more divided. It's just a divisive time in general in America, and it has been. It feels like for the last 6 to 8 years or so, it just seems like a divided time, and that doesn't help any getting anything done. Because the Republicans don't want to give a win to the Democrats, and the Democrats don't want to give a win to the Republicans. So everybody's got to get a win in any kind of bill, and I think that's hard to do. That's hard. It's a hard line to walk. So, I think Ted Cruz last April, I think it was last March or April, said that he thought the percentage of a bill getting done by the end of last year was 60%, 60-40. He said. And many Democrats rolled their eyes. And they were right, because it didn't get done. I don't know what the percentage is now, but I would say it's around that, or maybe slightly less than that, in something getting done. But they have a very finite time to get something done before the midterm elections next year changes the makeup of Congress. The Democrats are probably likely to retake the House of Representatives in the midterm elections. And so when you have one party that is controlling Congress in the White House, it's usually easier to kind of get something through. So their hope is that over the next, before the election season kind of gets rolling, is to get something done. So they've got about 10 months, 10, 11 months when you talk to people. They need to get something done by like April or May of next year. I think it would help if the House settlement is approved so they can use that and codify that. But that's no given. So I still say all that to say I wouldn't bet on anything happening. Um, but I maybe not bet against it either because they are closer than they've been. But I don't know that that really means a lot.
Well, Ross, we appreciate you here. I mean, you are one of the most trustworthy reporters that are in this space. We love everything that you do, all the time that you spend on this. I know many, many, many college football fans really appreciate you as well. So thanks for giving us some time here on the Big Mountain.
Yeah, no problem. It's good to join.
Thanks, Ross.
We again want to thank Ross for joining us on the Big Mountain. Great conversation. Steve, what were your main takeaways?
Like you said, a great conversation, great opportunity to have who I think the premier college football reporter, a serious reporter reporting on all the goings on in college football. We got to talk CFB. We got to talk negotiation tactics
Yes.
between the SEC, the Big Ten, and where the G6 sits.
Yep.
I'm sure you were thrilled when you got an answer from Ross on your question about the G6.
Loved it.
And for me, I think it just kind of confirms where we've been going and where we're at in the situation. Yeah. The CFP is still an ongoing negotiation. And a lot of the big things, once we get past the House settlement, so let's say it gets passed, all right, a lot of the big things revolve around the top two conferences. The power has consolidated towards the top two, whether other people like it or not. Unfortunately or unfortunately, it's consolidated there. And they are taking the lead here. If there's going to be changes to the CFP, it's because the Big Ten and the SEC want it. Yep. And there's so many other things they can use that leverage on the G6 to get what they want. There's so much negotiating power there. There's big decisions to be made, and it just seems like all of that decision-making power is consolidated at the level at the top two.
Yeah, and you know, I totally appreciated that he answered my G6 question, because that's been on my mind for quite a while. I haven't really heard anybody really speak to that, and I appreciate Ross, you know, kind of address that and kind of have a similar opinion as to what I have regarding that. But yeah, the negotiation piece, I mean, he mentioned, you know, we focused on the CFP and the governance. And, you know, I should have prefaced this by saying, you know, we kind of are under the assumption the House settlement's going to pass. Because if it doesn't, holy cow, just a whole nother situation. So kind of took that as an assumption on our part. But, you know, we talked about the governance and CFP. He also brought up, obviously, the calendar and the transfer window that's ongoing. People have different views on that. I've talked about revenue sharing and the clearinghouse and how that's actually going to work after a hopeful settlement here to move us forward. So there's so many things that are being negotiated both behind the closed doors and somewhat in public. I mean, as I said, talking to him, we went 3 straight days where the SEC talked about 3 different models, and they liked 3 different models, so, or they didn't like, or whatever the case may have been. So lots of negotiations going on, and I don't think there's any, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4. I think it's very fluid, as Ross alluded to.
One thing I find very interesting, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts, and he was blunt in his answer to you. Yes, the G6 they're being held hostage basically by this access to the CFP. And so it's basically it's like the almost the fatal flaw in the situation. It's such a great opportunity for the G6. We saw Boise last year. I'm sure UNLV will want to compete for that spot this year. You know, Memphis, a Tulane, you know, it's such a great opportunity for the G6 to be on the same field, be on the biggest platform in college sports, but at the same time, in order to maintain that access, they can't rock the boat too much. So it puts them in a crazy position. And I'm interested to, after we got that definitive answer from him, who kind of confirmed what you've thought for a while, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, it confirmed exactly where I think the G6 is at. I don't think you're not going to have the public opinion from any of those conference commissioners as you're having with, you know, we talked to Butterly, we talked to Wistersill, you hear from the A4. I definitely think the G6 is going to lie low. I mean, they'll put out their ideas and their comments behind closed doors, but they're not going to do it publicly. We're not going to see that. I'd be shocked.
The last guy from the G6 was the AAC commissioner last year, and now he's gone. He's retired.
So
got rid of him.
Yeah. So I don't think I think looking at the future, I think in the short term, that's the carrot that's going to keep, you know, FBS at 10 conferences. I think that's the carrot for the next 5 years or 7 years, whatever that's going to be. But at some point, it's got to break. It has to break. And whether that's breaking football away, as Commissioner Butterly talked about, he's an advocate for that. Or, you know, in my conversation with Commissioner Wistersill, he talked about his time as an AD in the MAC. And where their revenues are just kind of steady, very slight increase, where Ohio State's just there's absolutely no way to keep pace with that. And that's only going to continue, and it's until the point where it has to break. And I don't know what that break looks like. But at some point, whether it's football breaking away or the A4 breaking away or something major has to happen. And I don't know exactly when that'll be. It's not going to be right now. It's going to be in the future, but something's going to have to happen.
Forgive me, but it feels like the SEC and the Big Ten, they're the drug dealer to the G6. They're giving them that good stuff that they want, but they're keeping them on the line. They're keeping them on the line. Is the G6? Are they going to keep coming back for more, or at some point are they going to say this is just crazy? You know, can the Wyomings, the San Jose States, the trying to think of a Troy,
Yeah.
can they keep up with Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, USC,
Right.
who has a $20 million NIL?
Right.
Like, when does it not make sense anymore to try and show that you're on the same stage with them?
I don't have the answer for that, but I think that is exactly the point that, I think where we're headed. And I'm not one for a breakaway. I'm
Yeah, me neither.
actually hopeful that we can get settlements and maybe congressional action and get rulings that have us all be able to play somewhat competitively. But in the absence of that,
Yeah.
it's not going to fix itself. That's for darn sure. It's only going to continue to get worse. So it's going to be really interesting to watch. But again, thanks, Ross, for joining us.
Yeah, it was awesome.
So, hey, we thank you guys for watching this episode. We do all things college football all year round. So if you're not already subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that. Make sure you pound the like button on this. We're gearing up for college football. We pick all the Big Ten and the Mountain West games. So if you're a bettor, if you just want to hear where we're at for this college football season, make sure you check us out. So, hey, again, we thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time on the Big Mountain.